Welcome to The Firing Line with Philip Naiman. The Firing Line radio show is brought to you by Bullseye Sports in Riverside, CCW Safe, Cutting Edge Bullets, Vortex Optics, Vortex, the Force of Optics, and by Philip Naiman and Cornerstone Christian Wealth Management. And now your host, Philip Naiman.
There's a gap there for some reason.
Good. Bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
Hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of Firing Line Radio Show. I know you're all out there trying to do some fun things this fall, and I wanted to take this opportunity to reach out to a very special guest. And I know I've been chastised for calling all my guests special, but this is actually a very special guest. This is Brad Daicus. Brad Daicus of the Pacific Justice Institute. PJI.org is their website if you want to find out more about them, and you will, because once you figure out the kind of work that this guy's been doing on your behalf for your civil rights, for your civil liberties, and including your Second Amendment rights, you're going to want to find out more. So let me just bring him straight on. His time's way more valuable than mine. So Brad, how's your morning going?
Pretty hectic, but doing well.
Yeah, I know. They're all hectic for you, aren't they?
Well, not all, but the Epoch Times, I'm going to be talking to them right after we're done with this one. So it's pretty active morning.
Very good. So one of the things I want to talk to you, well, let's just give a little a little background on what Pacific Justice Institute is, what they do,
Sure.
and who you are.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate this opportunity, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I founded the Pacific Justice Institute back in 1997 with the help of former U.S. Attorney General Ed Meese. That's 25 years ago. Fast forward, we defend religious freedom, parents' rights, and the sanctity of human life without charge all across the United States. We have more offices in more states than any other organization of our kind, bar none. We are actively engaging in uniquely making sure that everyone gets help. So we don't just cherry pick a few high profile cases that look good for funding development purposes. We work hard to make sure that everyone gets help, that no one's left on the side of the road. So we have right now over 100 cases in active litigation, plus there's countless numbers more that we take on and get resolved without litigation. And just one case alone, like for example, our lawsuit against San Francisco, we're representing over 1,000 plaintiffs, over 1,000 employees who are wrongfully fired because of their faith. So we're very busy, and it's been a joy to serve, and so many countless numbers without charge over the years. And if people want to keep up with our work, or they like to support our work, we're a nonprofit 501c3, tax deductible, or they'd like to get our weekly newsletter via email and updates, they should just go to pji.org, P for Pacific, J for Justice, I for Institute.org, and we'd love to serve them without charge.
And 25 years you've been doing this. And how many
That's right.
victories have you had?
Countless numbers.
Right.
Countless numbers of victories. Well over 90% of our case matters end up in a victory. We do high quality legal work. We have a great team, and with humble hearts to serve, and it really works very well as we all work together to take on these major challenges to our freedoms and liberties. We also get involved in equipping and empowering people. So we litigate, but we also empower. On our website, we've got great resources like 12 steps to protect your children from social workers or CPS. Very important. Every parent should have that. And then we have other resources as well that can really empower parents in churches and people of faith in many other ways as well. So we're definitely engaging.
And the rest of the show, we wanted to end up talking about one of those is your church security information. So we want to make sure we dive pretty deep into that. But the topics that you deal with generally are, and I mean, are you specific as far as which topics you're going to represent?
Yeah, just we're very, very broad. So if it deals with religious freedom, assuming it's not an intra-church dispute, we don't get involved in those. We take those on. Parents' rights, parents against the government, we take those on. We'll sue school districts and defend parents' rights to homeschool. If it's one parent versus another parent, we don't get involved in those. And then sanctity of human life, very broad. We help pro-life clinics, pro-life counseling, pro-life free speech. We also sue Planned Parenthood very aggressively, and we also work hard to intervene to save the lives, for example, of a little baby or an elderly person who's being having the plug pulled, if you will, and sentenced to death, when in reality they're not brain dead, and there hasn't been an opportunity for the family to have a second opinion. We've gotten involved in those cases as well, and we've saved lives, little infants and adults.
I think I saw that in Monty Python, The Holy Grail, where, I'm not quite dead yet.
Yeah. And also another example are, people who have not had the COVID vaccine, and for religious reasons, strong convictions, which now there's a lot of scientific justification for not getting it. But despite whatever people may believe on it, there's a lot of individuals with deep convictions. Well, there's a number of them who are waiting for organ transplants, and about 8% of our hospitals are requiring these people to be vaxxed in order to get a life-saving organ transplant. We have a gentleman we're representing who's a veteran in the Air Force, served his country, and he's being denied kidney transplants, which are critical. His existing kidneys only are 4% functional, and he's going to die. But we have over 100 people like him we're representing who are literally on death row because of their refusal to get the vax. They're going to die. And so that's a classic example. And then another example on religious freedoms, a little outside the box, is dealing with religious asylum for people from communist countries or Muslim countries, Christians or Jews who are desperately wanting not to be sent back to death. We have about 100 Christian Afghan refugees who were able to get out of Afghanistan, but they're in a concentration camp in a hostile Muslim country. And we at the Pacific Justice Institute have been called in by a Baptist mission organization to get them out and to get them here in the United States, where they can do some wonderful ministry work for Muslim Afghan refugees here in this country. So we've got some exciting things we're undertaking right now.
So I'm gonna make a random guess that you are not representing the Satanist group that wants to keep abortion open because it's one of their sacraments. I'm just gonna make a guess that that's probably not a. Did you see? I mean, obviously, you saw that, right?
No, I haven't seen that. It's obviously pretextual. This is, people who, when they say they're Satanists, they're really atheists who are going through these motions just to jab, either just to annoy and jab people of faith out of actually religious intolerance, or trying to push the envelope to intimidate local governments and others to squash all religious expression, all religious accommodation, for fear that these Satanists are going to put a Satan flag up or something like that. They're actually very intolerant groups, often driven by hatred towards people with sincere faith and a belief in a real God. So these are predominantly pretextual. You have some who are into it, but in these kinds of contexts, it's usually atheists positioning themselves to do that. You have in schools, high schools, you have Satanist clubs. These are really atheists trying to jab Christian clubs and people of faith.
Grab a headline.
And they should be called out accordingly, because that's really what they are. So we don't take those kind of case matters seriously. You're absolutely right.
So you're based in California now. Are you just staying here because that's where the fight is? It's a lot easier. You don't have to travel back and forth to the different courts because all of them are here.
Right. We're here I'm here in California. We're very busy. I'm here in Orange County specifically because I used to live in Sacramento, but I've got population, about 70% of the population of the state of California within an hour and a half of my home. So there's a real advantage to that. But we have offices, we have 6 offices in California. And then we also have, offices all across the United States, from Seattle to Miami, to Boston, to Orange County, from Chicago to Houston, and places in between. Wherever there's a large blue blotch on the U.S. map, you can be assured that there's very likely a Pacific Justice Institute flag that's landed and ready to go to bat there in that area.
Very good, folks. That's who Brad is. He's been a fighter for years. I've known him for quite some time. We actually had him out at the Tea Party a few times out here in Southern California. But with that background, this show, we focus on the Second Amendment. We love all the amendments. We love the Bill of Rights. We focus on the Second Amendment because I have to keep it simple for myself. You can handle all those fighting justice on all the different fronts. I just need to keep it simple. Now, one of the things that's been under attack by our government has been our ability to carry defensive weapons of any kind in certain areas, in restricted areas. And some of those areas are schools, some of those areas are churches. And we want to talk about that when we come back, and your church security system. Folks, Philip Naiman, Firing Line Radio Show. Check out Brad Daicus at pji.org, pji.org. We'll be right back after this.
Phone's ringing. Just keep rolling.
Yep.
All right, here we go.
He's on a time schedule.
This portion of the Firing Line is brought to you by Bullseye Sports in Riverside.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. See this? This is my boomstick.
That's right, folks. Welcome back to Boomstick Radio. Philip Naiman here. I've got Brad Daicus on the line from Pacific Justice Institute, pji.org, pji.org. We just talked in our first segment about all the great things that they do and how busy this gentleman is. And I do appreciate the amount of time he's giving us for this interview. I want to jump right to it. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on this show, where we're Second Amendment focused, not only are we for all of our civil rights, but we're Second Amendment focused on this, as I explained, as we want to go over your church security seminar and system in California with the Gavin Newsom, who is running for president. I am pretty darn sure of that. He had, well, not just he, but the state legislature and in many other states, they've been passing laws about where you can actually carry a firearm. And some of those restricted areas have to do with schools. And it's like, well, geez, that makes sense. Maybe we shouldn't have a gun in a school. Then only the bad guys can have guns in schools. But many of those schools are leased out over the weekend for church services. And they didn't give any kind of a delineation between 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. weekdays versus that property is like a holy grail that no firearm can ever be there to defend anybody. So I want to reach out to Brad and start with that premise and then go through the rest of your church security detail, if that's all right.
No, yes, I'd be happy to. As far as giving an overview of what we have on our website, a wonderful resource. I was just trying to look it up. That deals with church security, and a video presentation that we talked about. We put it together with the help of Attorney Ronald Hackenberg. Ronald is someone who heads up our office out of Mississippi. He opened that office after 20 years of law enforcement service in California, and one of his specialties was dealing with providing security for churches and community buildings and facilities from vandalism, from mobs, from violence, etc., and how they can protect themselves. So we have some real hands-on experience in putting this together. Of course, we at Pacific Justice Institute are also principally, very supportive of the Second Amendment. It's right after the First Amendment. First Amendment, I think, is the most important. Our ability to express ourselves, to live our faith, to freedom of the press, freedom to gather. But this right behind is the Second Amendment, and that is the ability for we the people to be able to, when push comes to shove, to be able to secure these rights in the event that government breaches their commitment via the Constitution to do so. So this is a very, very important right. I want to, as far as give a little background as far as some of the case law on this, in terms of usage of a firearm, because I think that's real fundamental for many churches. Some churches have policies where there's no weapon, there's no firearms, and some have done so very proudly. thinking that, oh, we're above this violence, and guns, and we're just trusting in the Lord, and we're gonna, allow this to, we're just peaceful, and we'll just love anyone who comes in and just embrace them, and they'll have no problem. Well, we now know in reality that that's not the case. Churches do get attacked, and from no matter how well-meaning the church may be and loving they may be, you have evil people out there because we live in an evil world. So churches need to be able to protect themselves and defend themselves, and their right to be able to bear arms is very important. Now, a problem we had with a number of states across the country, states like California, New York, and others, is that they would often prohibit guns from being outside the home, or they'd have conditional use permits, but make it very difficult. There was a very important decision came out of New York recently with the last Supreme Court.
Bruin case, yes.
Yes, decision. And this case is very fundamental because the state of New York was saying, okay, you can have a right to bear arms in your house to protect you against a criminal coming in, to hurt your family. But you're not entitled to bear arms outside your house. And we, the state of New York, know what's best. We're going to prohibit you from being able to defend yourself. Of course, we know what happens in New York City. Innocent people get shot and killed all the time by thugs.
Or stabbed 47 times on the corner in broad daylight.
Yeah. And it's easy for them to do so. These criminals, whether it's in the form of a robbery or smash and grab, or whether it's just out of just hatred and maliciousness, or someone who's crazy, they do it with confidence, knowing that no one's going to be able to stop them because guns are illegal and people can't hold them, bear arms. Well, the Supreme Court looked at this, and they looked at this case, and they said, no, the right to bear arms in the Constitution doesn't say in your home. It's the right to bear arms. And if you look at the understanding of why we have the right to bear arms, it's not just to protect ourselves against criminals coming in our house. Historically, the right to bear arms was important, as I alluded to earlier, it was an important backdrop for ensuring that our rights are still protected if this government thing under the Constitution turns out to be corrupt and turns against the people. They have the ability to step up and take back their government, because we are a nation of the people. So the Supreme Court understood the Constitution. They looked at this and they said, no, the right to bear arms includes not just in your home, but outside your home. And this is very, very basic and fundamental. Now, the state of New York, they've decided they're going to try to get around it. So they said, okay, fine. Well, we'll ban guns, arms to being born in subways. We'll ban there in public parks. And so they have all these restrictions. I think those restrictions are also going to be shot down as unconstitutional. It's just the state of New York, and the city of New York in particular, to just simply trying to get around the Supreme Court ruling. It's a historic ruling, and basically what it means is that churches can have guns in their premises. They can have people with guns in their premises, and this is very important. So we at Pacific Justice are encouraging churches. Point one is to have people in their church during church services with concealed weapons. Of course, they need to comply with concealed weapon permit requirements pursuant to the state, requirements that you're dealing with. We're not, you don't go against the law, but understand that they, in the past, parts of California, San Jose, for example, and that whole area has, the San Francisco Bay Area, they've denied concealed weapon permits, just flat out denied them.
LA County for years until this last year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they can no longer do that with this case precedent. And if they try to do that and just arbitrarily deny someone, that person will have a great case to take back up to the Supreme Court. And so that's very important. People understand that times have changed. So who should bear arms in the church? Who should get a conditional use permit? Well, you don't want everyone. Some people have temperaments that are probably better off not having them. You want to have someone who has, ideally, is someone who has law enforcement experience, security work experience, military experience, someone who's used guns, have been trained with guns, they've been in perhaps in situations where they may have had to have used firearms. That's the best for a number of reasons. Of course, number one, it's just logical. They're going to be the least likely to make a mistake. But second is for legal reasons. Let's say that the church is sued. Let's say someone comes into the church and there's a physical force used against them, possibly a gun. Do you want, would you rather have a former defensive lineman, from high school or college, defensive lineman, tackling them or using a gun? That would be, and you've got to defend whether or not that was reasonable use of force. The problem is if that person is hurt and files a lawsuit against the church, they're going to cross-examine that individual that used force and say, so how many people have you tackled? Football player? Quite a few, huh?
Yeah.
So you used to just tackle
slamming them
people.
into the concrete. Exactly.
Yeah, slamming them in, and
You brought up a lot of points. We're gonna run to a commercial break here. A lot of good points. Who carries, training standards, how to protect the church, how to protect yourselves. Folks, Philip Naiman, check out Brad Daicus at pji.org, pji.org, firinglineradio.com for all of our podcasts. We'll be right back after this. So
hopefully I'm covering
This portion of the firing line.
What did you say?
Hopefully I'm covering everything you want to cover. I mean,
dude, this is your show. So yeah, I want to make sure we get everything you guys do and so people can understand it and then they can get involved with you and we'll go from there. Okay, Dan.
This portion of the firing line is brought to you by CCW Safe by Philip Naiman and Cornerstone Christian Wealth Management.
Spartans, lay down your weapons. Come and get them.
Hey, folks, welcome back to Firing Line Radio Show. This is Philip Naiman here with Brad Daicus from PJI.org, Pacific Justice Institute. They don't just work in California. This is a nationwide organization. If you got a blue town near you, they're in there defending your civil rights. So, and obviously, they are, when they defend somebody, it's no cost. How does that happen? It happens because people like you, the great listeners of this show, send them funds at pji.org. You hear about these cases that are happening in another state and say you're in Prescott, everything's beautiful where you are, right? Perfect place. When you hear about the craziness out there, you can send funds to help defend that. You can fight from where you are through the Pacific Justice Institute. So pji.org. Specifically here with Brad, we're talking about their church security seminar and services that they have. His last segment, we talked about, who carries. The church, if you're in an official usher or security position, the church will have the ability to decide who. He's giving some ideas as to who is qualified or things to think about for your church. Also, training standards. Right? Are they documented? Do you have anything like that? So Brad, let's pick it up from there. You just talked about who carries. You don't really want the 270-pound defensive lineman doing a double leg takedown into a guardrail, unless the guy deserves it, and then I'm all for it. But you need somebody who knows how to restraint force, use proper force, not too much. And then, are there training standards you guys recommend?
Yeah, certainly. So you don't want someone who is untrained with, former football player. That's the worst case scenario in many ways. You want someone who
tackling stuff like this.
Yes, exactly. You want to have someone that has experience, ideally occupationally, with a gun. Now, some churches or synagogues, they may not have that. They just simply, they may not have anyone in their congregation like that. Well, what they need to do then is, as people who feel comfortable with guns, some people don't, so you don't want to push them. But if they do feel comfortable, you want them to go through training, a training process, training seminar, and part of that training is there's two parts to it. Part of it is to train them, obviously, on how to use it, when not to use it. But part of it also is determining whether or not they're suitable to use it. And for example, I know of people who've been trained before for churches, for law enforcement, and they go through the testing process, And when push comes to shove, you've got, I've heard, one person, goes out and just, starts shooting, and, they're too impulsive. The other one, the criminal comes in, starts shooting the congregation, and this person just hits the floor and just sits there and sort of assesses what's going on, while more people are being shot and killed. So that's how they function. That's how they are. You want someone right there that's balanced, can think quickly, non-compulsively, and know exactly what to do, and has that balance. Mentally, emotionally balanced is very important. You don't want someone who is on medications that could alter their mental ability to think rationally and properly. Individuals who are going through personal emotional issues or family issues, maybe they're
step down for that time period.
Yeah, step down, depression. And I don't say this lightly, because it's not uncommon for people to have depression at some times in their life. Sometimes there's things that just happen that can cause them to feel depressed in those situations. Or you may have someone has an issue with alcohol, perhaps. That's a big red warning flag as well. So these are some qualifiers that they need to go through training. Whoever they are, you want them to go through training, not just for the practicality of it, but also for the legal liability of it. It helps defend you if your church is sued later in a court of law. That's very important. Churches also should have policies on how to deal with people from an incremental perspective coming into the church. So, sometimes churches will just have people walk into the church and that's it. There's no one, there really to greet them. Sometimes you'll have someone just greeting them right as they're going into the sanctuary. What we recommend, and I've seen this done well at times, where you have people greeting individuals as they're coming out of the parking lot into the outside sidewalk area. And I'll never forget this. I do a lot of guest speaking at churches, and I love to do that. But I was wearing a suit and tie, and I definitely stood out, because I think this was a Calvary Chapel, and I was wearing a suit and tie. Yeah, I definitely had an error there in my prior planning. But anyway, so I'm got out of my car. I'm in the parking lot. I'm just stepping up to the curve. These two men are right there to greet me, and they give me that firm handshake, look at me eye to eye. Welcome, glad to have you. They're assessing my grip. Is it shaking? Is it unstable? They're looking at me in the eyes. Is any they are assessing me real clearly, talking to me.
Well, you had a jacket and tie on. They thought you were there to serve somebody.
Yeah, they were probably a little nervous in that regard. So I'm sure. So anyway, they assessed me, approved me. Of course, in a very friendly way. I walk up the steps to the next area right in front of the church. There's two people right there to greet me, connecting with me, assessing me. Then I go inside the church, in the church lobby, right before I go into the sanctuary. There's someone there to greet me as I'm going into the sanctuary. Someone there in the sanctuary, they're greeting me to find a place for me to sit. They have multi-layers here of people assessing me as I come in, for the sake of course, to exhibit the love of Christ and connect with me, but also to make sure that I'm not going to be a danger or risk. It's very important. And it's also, let's say you have someone let's say it's someone who's really dressed weird. Okay, now suit and tie can be weird depending on your congregation, but let's take it a little differently. Let's say you've got someone who is someone who normally you don't expect to be attending your church, dressed a different way. Maybe it's a man dressed like a woman. Okay, should your church, put them to the ground? No, just because they're dressed differently or look differently doesn't mean they're a violent threat. But what about a disruptor? You want to assess them to see, are they coming to disrupt, or are they coming to seek and to connect and to find? And that's real important as well. So you want to make sure that your staff are trained not to have immediate assumptions that the reason someone is there is to disrupt, although it's very possible. We've seen this happen at churches, but you want to assess, Why are they there? If they sit down somewhere, maybe having someone who is able and trained to connect with people who might be a potential disruptor, to be able to sit down and in a way that's very loving and caring and connecting, but also very trained and astute on how to deal with potential disruptors, violent or otherwise.
Now, is this all the stuff that you guys go through with your seminar?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
How does somebody set up a seminar for your church, for their church?
Yeah, what they need to do is just contact our office at pji.org, and first I encourage them to do on our website is to take a look at the resources we have, written materials
10
on
pages,
this.
10 pages of documents there, folks, that really spell a lot of the stuff out.
Yeah, and it's really well done. So I would do that first, see if that's sufficient or not. And if they have more questions and they'd like to do something with their church elders, we can have that set up and established. We can, depending on where they're located, we could possibly do it in person, or we could do it via Zoom. We even have a church liaison, full-time pastor church liaison, Peter Moore, who heads up our church engagement office in Palmdale, California. That's what he does. He connects with churches to meet their needs. What do they need? How can we fill those needs? Always without charge. So we have a real operation, if you will, for the purpose of serving churches and their needs in so many different areas, whether it's helping them with their bylaws, protecting them in terms of liability and their free speech rights, empowering them to have their voice heard in different forums, starting homeschool co-ops at their church, private schools. There's just so many opportunities for us to serve. This is just one of a number of opportunities in terms of serving churches. That is security and helping with church security.
So you do these seminars free of charge, but there's an expense to doing that. So typically, do you have any idea what would be an added, the church should cover the expense, right?
Well, we don't ask them to do
charge,
that.
but
We don't charge. We don't make a suggestion. We don't even mention it.
I'm going to make a suggestion: cover the expenses and then some. Okay,
Yeah,
folks, Philip Naiman, Firing Line Radio Show. We'll be right back here with Brad Daicus. He's too nice a guy, folks. PJI, unless you're in the courtroom, PJI.org, PJI.org. He's out here defending you. We'll be back here for one more segment, and then we're going to let him go.
All right, here we go.
Okay, Dan, we got to keep him going.
Thank you.
This portion of the Firing Line is brought to you by
Love to chat,
Vortex
but-
Optics. Vortex, the force of optics.
Yes! Great hunter. Yes? Fine figure of a man. Yes? Yes?
Yes.
That is all you need to know for now.
Hey, folks, Philip Naiman, Firing Line Radio Show. Check out our podcast at firinglineradio.com. And while you're on that website, look at all of our sponsors. We got great discounts there. CCW Safe. We're going to talk about that in a second here. FL Radio 10, Maglite, Firing Line 15%. Cutting Edge Bullets. Use Firing Line for 20% off on that. We've got all kinds of swag. EMP Shield, we've got Firing Line as your discount code for $50 off on that. So lots of ways to save money, and all that money you can save, you can donate to the Pacific Justice Institute at pji.org as they're out here fighting for your rights. We talked about training. Now this is the difficult thing is how do you get a gold level of this is what training should be? Somebody should be able to do X. In California, for your CCW, and this is a two-edged sword to talk about it, but to qualify for your CCW is so simple. You could do it with a brick. And, Rob High from CCW Safe and I talk about this all the time. We don't really want to make it more difficult for somebody to get a CCW, but training is essential and it needs to be your responsibility. To carry is your right. If you're carrying, it is your responsibility to know how to use this because you own every projectile you send down range. You own it till it stops moving. It's got your name on it. If it hits a bad guy, great. If it hits somebody behind the bad guy, not so good. Or, obviously we never want to see any innocents hurt. That's not the purpose of carrying a firearm. It's there to defend life. not property, but to defend life. And so how do you guys address your training standards and the liability factor? You know, we, as you heard on a couple of the commercials there, CCW Safe sponsors this show. They have unlimited criminal and civil defense coverages. That's pretty much unheard of. So we always recommend somebody have that. Would you recommend for churches that they require that if someone's going to carry on their, or some kind of a liability coverage, if someone's going to carry as a security or a usher or something like that?
Yes, definitely. It's for liability reasons alone it's important, but also just to make sure that the church has done everything they can to avoid an unnecessary fatality or injury. It's very important. I mean, a head of a church, a pastor of a church, the last thing they want to see happen is for someone to be killed, a criminal or otherwise, and have to second guess as to whether or not that was necessary or could have been prevented if their people had been trained. So this is just about being a good steward with the knowledge and information that we have, and just being responsible. It's very important. There's some other things that need to be addressed as well. If I could, I want to make sure I don't miss these. And that is, the church also needs to look at their exiting procedures and where their exits are. Pastors need to look at the risk element with regard to their church. From the pulpit, for example, is there bulletproof, plexiglass behind the pulpit protecting the church? Does a pastor need a bulletproof vest? Perhaps many pastors would go against this, but in some areas where you have high crime, or it's a large church, or maybe they're dealing with people with sort of mental issues, this could be a very reasonable thing to do.
In this day and age, if you're a pastor preaching out of the Bible, you deserve a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, if someone's preaching, say, in a public place, we deal with public evangelists. I think it could be a good advice for them to have such protection. But so these are some some immediate protection measures, personal protection measures. As far as the church itself as a building and as a structure, I think it's important to address this as well. So ideally, it's great if a church can have some kind of a protective gate around the church. And to protect it from people, making it more difficult for them to come in, have more defined entrance and exit places, ingress, egress. That's always a good thing. Also, adequate lighting for a church. The more lighting there is, the more, especially for evening events at a church, is less likely someone's going to want to come in. There's going to be clear lighting, seeing them. And then, of course, exterior cameras, very important. This is a no-brainer. Every church should have exterior cameras that are monitoring the entire facility from the outside. Churches might even want some interior cameras as well. And then you want to make sure that these cameras are not like hidden and secluded places. You want people to be able to see, looking at that church, and be able to quickly see and assess, oh, there's cameras there. And those cameras need to be in a system in a way that at the very least records, doesn't just have live monitoring somewhere, but actually records on an ongoing basis what's taking place. You can get these systems put in; they're not expensive. That will record in a box 24/7 for 28 days in a rolling way. So it's continually updating, and for the last 28 days. This is a very basic, very important thing to have. Proper locks on your church facility to assess, are they really making the efforts? So let's say there's a threat that they hear about that's possibly coming in. They need to be able to do this. I know a church in San Francisco, is a Baptist church in San Francisco. They were having their church service, and there was rioters. This is a number of years ago. Trying to bust down the door. And the people in the church had to flee instead of law enforcement doing their job and arresting the thugs, the hate-filled thugs. Instead, the police said, we can't protect you. You just need to flee. So they had an exit procedure. They left the building. But that door been a lightweight door, insufficient locks, could have been bust down, and who knows what would happen to the people in that church in a very intolerant, hate-filled city like San Francisco. It can be very dangerous.
That reminds me of a little story in Genesis about a little city where the hate-filled mob kept banging on the door. And the angels had to kind of blind them, and then of course the next day the whole place fried. Why is that so similar with San Francisco? I don't know, that particular city. Yeah, it's just kind of odd.
And I like the point you mentioned. You said blind them. So we've been talking about usage of guns. It's not just
lights are amazing.
Yeah, lights are great, but there's other tools that can be used. For example, someone might want to have your ushers and people may be equipped with pepper spray. You may have someone that's a threat, maybe someone with a knife. Yeah, you could take them out with a gun, but maybe looking at the size of their blade and their temperament, etc., pepper spray may be sufficient to bring them to the ground, and you could then disarm them and not have to take their life. So different levels of protection.
Yep.
It should be a part of the process, not just guns. But I will tell you, I feel very secure when I go to church, because I know the church I attend, which will remain nameless for security reasons, that I know every Sunday there's at least three men that have concealed weapons, and I feel very, very secure. And they engage in these process. They go through these processes, and it's very important. Sometimes we just think of Sunday morning. It's not just Sunday morning. It's also other times as well. Sunday school classes, Sunday school teachers. These are kids, the most vulnerable. They need to be put in the loop. They need to be made aware of what's happening. Not just a sanctuary protected, but it's also nice to have someone who can also be close to and near the Sunday school classes to be able to take action as needed as well.
So only have a few minutes left here, and I want to touch on this. What about when the state says you can't have a firearm on a school property, and that's a church on the weekends?
Yeah, they should contact Pacific Justice Institute immediately for that. I believe that the school, we're talking about private schools. Mm-hmm. I think that given the case law that we have that came out of New York, I think they'd have an excellent legal argument and a legal case to in that scenario. So they should not hesitate to contact Pacific Justice Institute.
So if you have a private school on the church grounds, you still run afoul of this, and that's why you're saying contact them. If you're leasing a public school, you're definitely running afoul of that, and you want to make sure you contact pji.org, right?
Yes, yeah. With a public school, they can have their policies and procedures set up. It's a little more problematic. We'd have to look at that scenario and just to see what rights as a leasee they have to the premises, how unqualified those rights are, or how qualified they are and restricted they are. That's what we'd have to look at.
All right, folks, I want to thank my very special guest, and he is very special because he's working for us all the time. Brad Daicus, pji.org, folks, pji.org. Get involved. Look up their church security stuff, all their other things they do. Send them some funds so they can continue this fight. So while you're in a nice conservative place, send some money so they can go fight this somewhere else. Somebody had to fight in New York in the Bruin case. We're all have the benefits of that. So make sure that you support them, pji.org. Brad, thank you so much for your time. Have a great week.
Take care. Thank you.
God bless.
All righty.